Today, dear listeners, let us consider the process of making a pie. Let us first consider the crust. Traditionally, a pastry crust is made with little more than flour and sugar and cold butter and water, sometimes with lard. Sometimes it is wrapped in cheesecloth. Sometimes it is made with crumbled graham crackers blitzed into nothingness, and then mixed with warm butter. Simple. Let us consider then the filling of a pie. Often, a pie filling is of the fruit variety, with sugar and cornstarch. Depending upon the time of year, your pie filling may be green, or red, or blue. If it is a cold pie, it may be yellow or brown with a mountain of white atop. The white mountain is made of the whites of eggs with yet more sugar, blended until stiff and the peaks of the mountains are self-made. Intriguingly, it is only after mounded atop the colored filling of the pie that these peaks are torched and toasted. Some listeners may remember our symposium on the s'more. It is much the same process. In a way, the life of the Surf City 4-H pageant is much like a pie. There is a roundness to it. It encapsulates the whole town. The varying competitions are sliced into four categories, categories originally brought forth by the town's 23rd mayor, whose own personal pick for a category, livestock, was not chosen because of their conflict of interest as a purveyor of butchery. There is a category at the 4-H pageant for pie, another for chili. This split happened in 1981, coincidentally on the day of Ben's fourth birthday. It is why he is often called upon to judge the pie contest. This also means he cannot enter the pie contest, and considering how well liked his donuts are, this may be fortunate for every entrant involved. This is the only time of year where Ben is more likely to see Martha Margrave than Edgar. Ben enjoys Martha. He admires how she is strong-willed and independent in her old age. He knows nothing of her secrets, and even less about his own. It is dawn in Surf City when those who live there arise in unison. Light streaks across the sky. First, a hazel baby blue, almost blurry and smoky from where the horizon meets the waves. There are the barest creases of fog, seemingly emanating from the trunks of the trees themselves. On a usual day, there would be more of a slowness or dalliance as the world unfolds itself, and the only busy area might be the flurry of activity inside of Surf City Donuts. But today it is the activity outside where two brothers and a non-binary sibling, and now the whole town, work furiously to keep the early risers and sweet seekers of Surf City going. Today is the 4-H pageant, a great occasion. And the world is a different place. Tomorrow the world will return to itself sleepily as a giant or god awakened for some brief amusement and then return to slumber, uncaring of the world. Tomorrow the action of the two brothers and the non-binary sibling that make donuts will return to the inside of the donut shop. The Surf City 4-H pageant is one of the few events throughout the year that unquestionably everyone attends and pitches into. There are massive ribbons to be awarded, gift cards, food trucks, a new phenomenon, and farmland stands, an original part of the pageant, mingle and the good people of the town dawdle and celebrate together. This festivity has healed a few wounds over the years, and only once has been an occasion of public grieving. Martha has all those details, of course, but no one has of yet asked for them. For many years, there was also an autumnal maypole race and the announcement of the mayoral candidates. But both those traditions have changed, and even in Ben's mind, he can barely remember or recall having his forehead kissed by a man who smelt of cherry tobacco and whose mustache bristled his small, smooth forehead. The maypole now is more of a freestanding temporary gazebo in the center of town. It provides the luxury of seating, of shade, and works as a sort of bandstand as people come up and give impromptu performances throughout the day. This is outlined in the opening charter for Surf City, dated back to the town's founding. Surf City was one of the few cities in their county not to outlaw music and dancing, and instead outlining a series of almost mandatory cultural events one had to pursue before you could play the 4-H pageant. It is a very seriously protected law, and not just by Martha Margaret. Ben and Martha take their job seriously as judges. She judges the homemade crafting categories on off years so as not to seem partial. She has kept her eyes on the judges on other years because she has begun to see Louis Swan's smile in their eyes. Ben has a bad habit of eating too many snow cones before food judging. It is not uncommon for his lips to be two-toned in shades of blue and red as he enters judging tents or even one or two of the set-up barn displays for people to showcase their light flowers or their dark flowers. This, of course, is the acceptable and common nomenclature of the flowers that grow near the swamp and water runoffs just past the forest edge of town. Other towns use other dialects and regional affectation. Refer to your charge guide to know what those are. But much as light flowers are part of the sun's life, dark flowers retain the moon and the stars and the shade. Heat and coolness, all in balance and celebration at the 4-H pageant in Surf City. And technically, the swampy areas are a distinguished part of Surf City proper. It is uncommon to find any citizen out there usually, though, and it is a bit of a trek to get back to town from there. This is why the subsidized town sheriff's cabin, now inherited by one Barrack O'Mare, was built there, to create an artificial border for any curious or otherwise foolhardy citizens that they would respect, and to ward away the wandering and troubled child for whom Surf City seeps into their mind too early. Borders, much like crimping a pie crust, can be a tricky thing. Listeners, let us talk today about the concept of vacation. The Cosmic would like to remind you that vacation, along with holiday and words like Thanksgiving, often will stir in your charge a fond thought. They may be working toward a holiday of some kind. These holidays often show off the true nature beneath the mask they show the work-a-day world. Your charge will talk at length about vacations, holidays, and weekends. You must become comfortable with them as both a nebulous and concrete concept. Familiarize yourself with the nod, both solemn and emphatic, as you listen. A nod is a physical gesture from the top of the neck or underneath of the chin, as you understand your physical space. A few locations where a vacation or holiday might take place: abroad, land, roller coaster, ocean, beach, mountain, hot tub, caravan, staycation, getaway, contest win, busman's holiday, raffle prize, or convoy. Other words may still be in fashion, but these are some of the most common. You may also talk with your charge about the concept of luggage. This is a good way to find out how they gauge the importance of material goods. For charges 14 and under, however, this talk may not be as fruitful. Remember your age guide and chart within the initiation packet of your charge if your charge is a child under 12 or what is referred to as a teenager. Thank you. Returning to our story, Ben is holding a clipboard and testing pens and markers in preparation for awarding festive ribbons when Martha greets him in the privacy of the judging tent, which bustles with less activity than other places in town on this day. They exchange pleasantries, as people in positions of power or want to do. Martha thinks, were she just 30 years younger perhaps, Ben would make a handsome husband with his tamed curls and bushel of hair. His broad shoulders and thick forearm, the way he wears his jacket, his solidness, without intimidation, affable. Not that she would have been allowed to marry after the incident with Mary, state laws being what they are, but Martha is something of an optimistic pragmatist, and also she is not half dead. She has noticed many things about Ben over the many years he's grown in her presence, how steady his movements are, his helpfulness. There is something masculine about Ben that is nearly disproportionate to how she thinks of his siblings. Though perhaps she reasons everyone must have a favorite black brother. After all, they are of the few original descendants that are left in Surf City, though how many there are has been lost to the ages, how many for strange reasons. Martha knows. It's all on the ledger, in the genealogy books, in her little library in her home. And every year, doesn't the list seem to grow or shrink, paralleled? Don't strange things seem to happen in Surf City? Ben wears a necklace. It just slips slightly out of his shirt, and she asks about it. It is green and flares out gently at the edges, made of something like sea glass, but sturdier. It has bubbles trapped in amber-like time and is wound around bare and basic black leather threading. It is pleasant, captivating. She has seen it somewhere before, but cannot recall where. She thinks Ben would be happy to know if she can recall, so Martha folds the question into the back of her mind to think on while she judges the yarn-based crafting displays. An inordinate amount this year based around a sunflower theme, though themes are not often a part of the crafting display category, only like-minded individuals. Of all the events that have been added to the 4-H pageant, Martha only disapproves of the wasteful and violent nature of the pumpkin toss competition. There are two categories to this event, manual and machine-driven. The manual category she finds less messy and more corporate, and so she appreciates this. The machine-driven competition, well, Martha is the one who must field the calls to the mayor's office when people late into the year find bits of pumpkin, innards, and goo deep into the October season on their roof. It is easy to mistake the carnage for vandalism, and she is not impressed. Listeners will remember that any vandal risking their life to come to Surf City would surely meet a devious end with one stroke of the spray brush of the spray paints. Edgar, for his turn, is quite helpful in the cleanup of this manual and broken machine categories, and he prefers this, here on his own. It's a way for him to be useful and merry and civic all at the same time. This year is especially helpful, though his arms shake with overuse. Without his BR, he can feel it, the hollowness, the betrayal of his limbs. Picking up bits of pumpkin and broken sprockets and wheels gives him something to do. A 130-pound pumpkin is much easier to clean up, not just in debris chunks, but with BR in your system helping you fly high or completely disassociate, depending on the blood type the vampire who is trained provides you. It is hard to see the carnage, the squashed nature, the drying bits of pumpkin thickly flooding the streets, and for Edgar, not to think of himself. He thinks of himself in a brief and shocking moment, seeing one particular pumpkin open, cracked open in the street. Edgar feels the baldness of his life, the loneliness, the strange emptiness without BR, without rage, with all that he knows now about himself, about Mace, and about what he knows Mace does not know. And he wonders if he should have said something during those moments of honesty. He doesn't have time to dwell much, though. Soon enough, Varric Omer comes along, looking tall and handsome in his Carhartt boots and his rugged jeans and his thick caramel-colored khaki shirt, with just a bit of a blue and white flannel pattern Edgar can see under the collar and the cuffs, while Varric rolls up his sleeves to assist. Those forearms, so beautiful, so pure and strong and veiny. They aren't a mess of explosions with the undercarriage of a drag race track. Derek hasn't known the kind of life Edgar has had, not since they dovetailed in their personal histories, but here, amongst the carnage of the pumpkins, they seem almost equal. Edgar can trick himself into believing that much at least. And when Varric gets a gleam in his eye, wanting to rescue a rather large pumpkin for himself and leave with it, Edgar does not hesitate but only follows Varric's lead back to the sheriff's cabin to tease the man about duty and playing hooky and to bask for a moment in his warm smile. Privately, there is a shyness for Edgar, a moment of gawkiness again, that feeling. Has he ever felt that way with a woman? At the Dragon's Wing, or the diner, or anywhere else? Yes. Yes and no. Watching a movie, most definitely, but Edgar knows that is a habit he possesses. Power of being at arm's length. There was a woman once, though, back in the old times. Barrick's cabin has a scent or two about it on the porch. It's a deep scent of pine tar and a bit of acidity that makes Edgar think of dark, bitter winter cherries, like the marmalade Mary Margaret used to sell, sometimes in the back of what was then a general store. You'll still see an errant label for it on occasion, when rage was pressed against him and they were both in shadow in an alleyway behind what was then a general store. Edgar stands on the steps of Barrick's cabin, trying not to admire the man too much, and yet, when the sheriff smiles or talks about upcoming holidays, upcoming days, talks about the weather, the cold, the breeze, the leaves, Edgar finds himself unable to pull away, even politely, more and more captivated. He feels younger around Varric. Even just the simple act of sharing homemade cider, one of Varric's specialties, feels different somehow than with anyone else. Varric drinks out of mason jars in the simple gesture of forcing his hand open wider to accommodate the glass in Edgar's case, even with the briefest glances of a wince. He can't help himself but to enjoy the moment of the world in which he lives. He wants to ask what Varric wears for cologne. It smells so nice and different, and especially nothing like a pumpkin, which is a kindness, particularly at the end of such a day. I don't think you should be rewarding me for helping you shirk your 4-H duties, Edgar teases playfully with a bit of a smile, his voice a bit higher than it might be otherwise. Smiles actually hurt a little to make, but he doesn't mind for Varric. Please, we both served our time. Let the kids worry about it. Martha can yell at me later. I never get a day off, and this is a one night where I know everybody will be good little boys and girls, Varric says, and his lips twist up into a smirk. Well, at least publicly. You are dirty. Edgar chuckles and salutes Varric with his drink. There's a clink of thick mason glass against thick mason glass, and a brief stillness in the air. You don't know half of it. No? Come on, you're the good guy in town. There's nothing bad about you. Edgar growls, able to get back to his regular timbre and tone, able to seem effortless again. Derek shakes his head. I don't know. Living out here, I find myself talking to myself. And what's worse is sometimes I answer back. And then last week, a stray cat followed me home. I feel eyes on you, though, so it's not that weird. Feel eyes on me in this wild place. And the little cat was a wild, white furball of a demon with red feet, Varric says, and he just kind of chuckles. Weird. Not very good camouflage, Edgar replies. Not for this forest and swamp. But you don't have to feel lonely, though. I mean, as much as we're ever home, as much as it's far. I don't like to impose. Well, it's not an imposition. We were friends once. Were? Once? You breaking up with me, Black? Varric teases. Oh, it just seems like. Well, listen, Varric says. I know about you. You are more obvious than you think. You one day won't hurt so much, huh? But you are hard on yourself. The crown of your ancestors weighs heavily, as King Henry said. No, maybe Antigone. Oh, it would be nice to get away, wouldn't it? So quiet here, practically noisy sometimes. Edgar, caught up in his emotions, leans up on the step, on that top step to the porch and catches Varric in a kiss. She catches both of them off guard, but soon enough, melting into the kiss. Arms around each other, mason jars clutched in fingers, just so they don't drop. Lewis Swan watches from a distance, deep in the forest, on the edge of the swamplands where no one should dwell. Trouble would like to take this time to remind you about coconuts. Coconuts are survivors. They float and spring up where they would not have been before. No island is without them, in some form. They bring sustenance and hope, yes, but they are also the reason that mortals use tools. Coconuts begat violence. Their tasty innards are a warning, a doom, a beating trundle sound upon the world. Mortals are like crabs in this way. You cannot stop the coconut, nor the violet mortal. We have found them, and they embrace us. Your hollow words mean nothing, O great cosmic. They believe in their violence and their sanctimonious words, which, we must remind you, you are not our doing, but your own. The coconut will be your undoing. Sorry about that, listeners. Ben cannot say where Edgar is, only that Edgar is gone, but that Mace is busy about helping with all the eaves on the gazebo and actually being useful, so he will not bother his brother. It is a nice change, not having to snipe after someone, to lead them by the bridle, to just let them be and remember that they are a mature creature able to act of their own volition. Martha complains about the shards of pumpkin in the goo in the street hardening into orange and white and yellow spiked masses that stick and roll, and even now are beginning to give off a stench. But Edgar is nowhere to be found. And when Edgar is nowhere to be found, he does not wish to be found. Ben has learned this over the years. Martha has been thinking about the necklace and knows more about it. She cannot recall why she knows, but it was there in her research, and it finally came to her. The type of necklace that Ben wears is called the butterfly swan. It is a symbol of some kind, though she hesitates to say and only gives it power when Ben insists with curiosity to know the name. It is a symbol of hard work. It is a symbol of unity and love. In some ways, it is a binding spell. Not that Martha would use the word spell. She merely dances around the word, quoting arcane soliloquies from books. Hollow words without hollow meaning. The more she speaks, the more she begins to wonder and fear for Ben. For why would someone give him this chain, this burden, this curse, this spell? How long has he had it for? And Ben thinks of it as a good luck charm, a pleasant family heirloom that he treasures wearing, part of his life even deeper and more consistent and more energized than the Surf City Donut shop itself. Martha does not refute this, but begins to think of ways to slip Ben information he will need. There is something about the butterfly spawn necklace that seems to wink at her, to acknowledge her, to spin in her direction on its opaque bubbles, as though eyeballs casting upon her to say, I see, and you know. In her panic in the night, she will see teeth sinking deep into flesh. She will cry out as though it is her flesh those teeth sink into. There is other sinking too, this night, as people amble home, away from the festivities, away from 4-H, and yet Mace is still working, and they feel a shadow upon themselves. What are you doing, Ben? I said I'd be home after I. They turn. It is not Ben, merely Ben's scent. Mace sees Truist standing there in the gazebo, and it suddenly feels as though the earth has no room at all, and that all tongues have lost the ability to taste, and Mace feels 6 inches tall. Careful with that twine and nail gun, Tourist replies, filling the silence. You remember what happened last time. Dear listeners, lovers old and new have seen each other. There is loneliness and silence where there was activity, suspicion, fear, but there is also hope. There is hope times 4H, if you will. But what will Mace do now that they have seen Trist, and Trist has seen Mace's, and Mace has smelled Ben? What will Ben do now that a dear secret is revealed, and what information does Martha hold that causes such fear within her? The only way to know is to continue on this path with us here in the Cosmos. See you next time. Surf City is an audio work of John McDonald and John McDonald Productions. It is meant for entertainment purposes only and is not meant to advertise anyone's lifestyle, health, or spiritual philosophical issues at there or any time. All opinions expressed are held by the characters and in some cases the creators of Surf City and Surf City, known as John McDonald.